we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. If everybody could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Oh, roll call. Here.
Mark Pascal.
Here.
Craig Arthur. Ben Kinsel.
Here.
Philip Snow.
Here.
Okay. Let's have the approval of the agenda and the March 3rd, 2022 meeting minutes.
I will make a motion to approve the agenda as presented, as well as the March 3rd, 2022 meeting minutes.
I would second, but I wasn't here, so
We'll
wait on him.
Mark Pascal, second.
Mark was here. So. All right, there's a motion and a second. All's in favor, say aye. Or sorry, we got to do a roll call vote. I apologize since Mark is on. I remembered as soon as I said it. Aye.
Mark Pascal.
Aye.
Ben Kinsel.
Is it appropriate for me to vote on it if I just abstain? I wasn't.
Procedurally, you actually can, but most people do just abstain if you get enough votes.
All right, I'll abstain.
Philip Snow.
Aye. Okay. Motion passes 3-0. All right. Is there any public requests to speak on topics not on the agenda? Oh, there is one. All right. If you go ahead and approach the podium and state your name and your address.
My name is Rafael Ortega. My address is 5412 Maywood Drive in Whitestown. I'm here representing 19 other households on the eastern side of Maywood Drive, filing a request for an immediate stop work order for the construction happening at the warehouses off of Edmonds Creek due to the flooding immediate risk that it has posed. In August of 2021, last year, that construction was brought before the board and it was approved. I stood up and commented on some math that clearly the engineers had missed regarding the amount of water table that was going to be adjusted by the construction that was happening there, along with the road and the remaining construction happening inside of the neighborhood, and it was passed off as unnecessary. Since then, we have had 3 separate floods happen along the easement on the eastern side of Maywood Drive, along with the 4 different floods of the retention pond along there. We have also had issues with coyotes and foxes in the fields back there being pushed out of where they used to be. That was another thing that was brought up by a separate individual who came and stood and spoke against that construction. But we were told that the environmental study proved that there were not going to be any dangerous predators that would get pushed out of that area and in towards the domestic or the residential neighborhood. That has been proven not true. I have multiple photos that I have taken along with this, all of this to prove what I'm saying. And like I said, I am representing 19 other households, counting mine. That's 20 along the eastern side of Maywood Drive. Of those 20, only 3 of those households were ever even informed by the board or by the appellant that the zoning was going, or that it was going to be rezoned as light commercial or light industrial use, as well as a notice for the actual construction to be approved. And because of that, very few of us actually showed up. In fact, I was one of those who did not receive notices of either of those 2 things happening, even though we are within the required plot of land between our house and or our land and the land that's under construction. The final point that is proven an immediate risk is not necessarily immediate risk, but it is breaching a lot of the regulations that are there regarding the sound and the construction timing that is occurring. They are outside of the 7 to 10 window that the PUD shows on their website, and it has caused many issues within the traffic along with the roads because the construction vehicles, who again the appellant committed to having a workaround road be constructed for the construction vehicles. Those construction vehicles have been running up and down Maywood Drive and along, I believe that's County Road 500, that's on the north side of the Edmonds Creek, to the point where they have damaged the road and they have had to be spot repaired by construction. So that is what I am here requesting at this point for an immediate stop work order.
I don't know that this is the correct
Yeah,
word or form for that.
it's not, I'm taking by your comments that this is the first, well, tonight's your first formal request for the stop work order.
I have submitted 2 appeals by mail and have heard nothing from it.
It's a typical way to do it, either probably through Jason's office. Through the planning staff, yeah.
Okay.
And the reason is to just not leave you hanging.
No.
Is that the way that the zoning code and the town's ordinances fall for those types of, you're talking about alleged enforcement issues under the PUD.
Correct.
And perhaps some other town ordinances. The enforcement authority falls in his office or the Whitestown Metropolitan Police Department as well. And so the proper channel would be to run through that. If that doesn't happen or you disagree, then you have rights outside of it. But it really should start there. Let staff take a look at it and come out, and if they need to issue a stop work order and they think that's appropriate or take other action, then they can. But this board actually sees appeals after that order is issued by the town.
Okay. That's fine.
Any additional requests to speak? Any online thing? No. Okay. We will move on to seeing no presentations or unfinished business. We'll move on to new business A, docket BZA 22-005-VA Leo Brown Group Parking Variance, which was continued at the last meeting. Petitioner, go ahead and start fresh.
My presenter walked away. My name is Brian Sheward. I'm with Kimley Hornet Associates. I'm a civil engineer. With me tonight, I'm the project manager on this project from the civil side. And maybe for Mr. Kingshill's background, I'll give a brief presentation on the project. With me tonight, representatives from Denton's, the law firm assisting the client, as well as Troy Birch here from Leo Brown Group, and then the master developer, Lindsay Phipps, is also here sitting behind them. In front of you, I printed off the presentation. Sometimes it's difficult to see on the screen when you're sitting where you're at looking at that screen. So I'll walk through this and explain the request and a little bit of the history here. Going to page 2. As you recall, we were here last month seeking a variance for exceeding the maximum off-street parking for the project. The ordinance states for multifamily that you can have a maximum of 2 parking spaces per unit. It doesn't go into the detail of splitting out a studio, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom. It just says unit. After a lengthy discussion at the BZA meeting, which obviously you were here, we went to the Plan Commission. We did receive a favorable recommendation from the Plan Commission for a concept plan, which is shown after this location map. If you go to the 3rd page, this is the site plan, and we've gone back and forth with town staff on a few concerns, especially Steve Milstead from a fire perspective, looking at access around the site, specific locations of covered parking and garages, and just the general layout. To walk you through the colors on the page, the blue units are duplex units, just to help understand the different mix. The yellow are 2-bedroom units, and the green are 3-bedroom units. So this is a detached multifamily, bit of a unique fit to fit into the multifamily category, but nonetheless, working with staff, that is the best category to place this project into from a parking perspective. 2-bedroom units, we have 76 of them. Those are 76 separate structures that are 2-bedroom, 76 3-bedroom, and 50 duplex units That's actually 25 structures, but there's 50 of them, or 50 units if you have two per structure, which takes a total of 202 units for the project. UDO would tell us then that the maximum amount of parking we can have is 404, which in the bottom left corner, I tried to summarize that we're asking for 462. So we have a request before the board to allow for 58 additional parking stalls above what the maximum is according to the standards that we're governed by. Those 462 spaces are split between traditional 9x18 parking stalls, where we have 303 of them. 75 are those same size stalls, but they're covered with a carport top. And then we have 84 garage spaces split up into the red or pink boxes that you see around the site. This is a nuanced request, so I think it's worthy of explaining the details of what we're actually asking for. Lastly, the purple lines that you see that are splitting up some of the units throughout the site, that's to show 20-foot corridors of green space that we worked with the fire department. They had a concern about accessing units behind units because it's a unique layout with parking out front and having structures sitting behind structures. And we explained that there's sidewalks that connect back into this kind of cottage style layout. We moved around units to create 20-foot corridors with Mr. Milstead had said would make them more comfortable that in the middle of the night, should there be a fire, there's green space corridors throughout the development that give a little bit more breathing room in those specific areas that we showed. So point being, we've been working with staff beyond, I would say, the variance request here to try to tee this up to move on to a development plan level, and we've been very purposeful about talking about that with staff. Next page. To reiterate, I talked about the 202 units, the 404 maximum, which is 2 per unit. We're asking for the ability to have 462 total parking stalls, which is 58 above the code maximum. And I wanted to highlight a few reasons why are we asking for this. If you look at the number of bedrooms in this development, we have 430 bedrooms. If you had a parking space per bedroom, that would be 430 spaces. We would already exceed the 404 maximum. Reason being, because we're fitting this into a traditional multifamily category, this particular development is heavier on the 2 and 3 bedroom units than what you may see in a traditional apartment complex, which have studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms. Periodically, they have a smattering of 3 bedrooms. Because we're catering to a different demographic, it's important to the developer to have more 3 bedroom unit mixes, which in itself carries 1 space per bedroom at 430. This doesn't take into consideration the clubhouse, which also needs to have some parking for staff and visitors who come. There's a pool. You could have visitors that come to, or an overnight visitor. And there's a situation where if you had a couple living in a duplex, it's within the realm of possibility that both a husband and a wife could both have a car and they're in a 1-bedroom duplex, and that's 2 right there. So in addition, what we've seen from our side is the concern with DoorDash, Amazon, delivery services. They come in, they drop off. We really don't want them parking in the middle of the drive lane when they make those drop-offs. In my personal experience, I've seen multifamily have too few parking spaces, and then that becomes a bigger issue with parking overnight, doubling in someone, parking on the corner, which isn't really a parking space, or even at worst case, parking on the street outside the development. There's a case in point, the watermark apartments over here that was brought up at Plan Commission when we were there for concept plan, where I believe they had requested more parking and weren't able to get it, and then it became an issue after the fact, and they had to come back and retroactively add in parking on the back end. So we're trying to preemptively not have that happen here. Lastly, I think the intent, or one of the main intents of a cap on parking in the ordinance, is to prevent what I'll call the Walmart effect, or the giant parking lot of asphalt. If you look at our site plan, this is integrated all along the drive lanes internal to the site, and this isn't generating a massive four-deep row of parking anywhere. It's integral to the plan. The reason for that is purposeful so that we can put parking as close to the units as possible around the development. Key considerations, the next page, just highlighting the fact that this is a unique case, that we have a maximum, we have a ceiling of 2.0, whereas neighboring development, their municipalities, and I'm referencing Zionsville because I'm doing a project across the street right now, they have a 2.0 minimum. So it's this little bit of a unique case where Whitestown has a max, other municipalities nearby have a minimum for different reasons. It's self-contained within the development. You really can't see it from the adjacent public right-of-ways. This is being fit into a multifamily category, but it's a little bit more like a single-family residential situation. So we're subject to the 2.0 maximum. Wanted to highlight that. And then lastly, additional parking and what the developer's asking for, I think situates, from our perspective, there's not a negative to it. If anything, it alleviates the potential for the risk of too much spillover parking going on. One of the items that we talked about at the last hearing that admittedly was a bit of a hang your hat on was there are garages. There's 84 garage spaces proposed. And the reality is some people will use it to put extra things that they have in there, may not park in it. They may not be leased because my understanding is they'll be leased garage units. And lastly, someone may have a motorcycle or something to that effect that we put in there and have a vehicle on the side. So that is a consideration. I think what's more important is just the mix, the development, and the type of demographic they're seeking in the mix of the 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, and duplex for this project. Staff has provided a favorable recommendation. The Plan Commission provided an approval on the concept plan. We're happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you. Staff report.
Previously, staff recommended adding conditions related to the parking breakdown of number of garages, carports, and covered parking, as well as removing 2 garages. The applicant has made adjustments to their concept plan in accordance with these requests. Staff recommends, for the record, still adding those conditions in that the garages be prohibited in those 2 areas, and the applicant be tied to the proposed breakdown of maximum 3 and 3 uncovered, 75 carport, and 80 as noted in their site plan.
Thank you. Public hearing portion. Is there anyone requesting to speak on this topic, on this item? None online. Seeing none in the room. I'll close the public hearing. Board, questions, comments?
One question I had, and I don't know how this can be addressed, but Phipps Drive is the road that kind of loops around the community, correct? I know one of the reasons for requesting the variance is to try to keep people from parking on that road, but what's to stop people like on these back units along like the south side of the property who says, well, my house is right here, close, parking on the street, and what is that road going to be set up for on-street parking as well, or?
So my understanding is no, it's not intended for on-street parking. And I think in any case like that, it becomes an enforcement issue on the backside. So I think that would go the same for any development adjacent to a public right-of-way, that if someone parks along the road, that road is not going to be set up at the width to.
And that was mainly the question.
Yeah, it's not like a residential street where you could kind of pull over
Gotcha.
It's intended to be essentially a 24-foot wide road, two-way travel. So,
Okay.
I've got a question, I think, probably for staff. Was there any thought of sort of designating the garages as storage space as opposed to parking? Because it sounded like, from what I read, that the idea is that the garage spaces we think are going to be used a lot for storage, and if we just designate them, we don't call them garages, just call them storage, indoor storage, then we don't have a parking problem.
this is a good point. I mean, if you take the garages out, then we're below the 2.0 per unit. We had talked about that during the kind of lead up to submittal, and it was clarified that they should be counted as parking spaces. So that put us in this position. I think that the practical side is some people will probably put things in the garage and park somewhere else. I don't think. Right. So I know that that was I'll claim the big argument at the last BZA meeting, but in coming back as a team and looking really, I think the issue we have is a ratio issue, because even if you were to reduce the number of units that we have total, then our allowable parking would also go down. So it's really a matter of trying to fit this use, which is a different demographic than what you may see in a 3-story multifamily with a lot of 1 and 2 bedroom or studios in this scenario where there's more 2 and 3 bedrooms. So I think that's a better argument for hardship, to be honest. But the reality still exists that people may park or not park in the garage and lease it.
I guess a question too for staff is there any concern going forward then? We've approved 4 multifamily projects, well, I should say Plan Commission has, without any request of variance of increase of parking. Is there any concern going forward of?
I would say no, just because this is a very different style product. The other apartment styles I double checked were all under 2, but again, those are apartment complexes versus a single family type style.
And legally, if your question's kind of leaning towards, are you setting any sort of precedent that moving forward, each application is going to stand on its own. And
Right.
as Jill said, this is unique and what appears to be unique, and that's how you should consider it. Certainly what the board has done in the past weighs into your consideration, but it's not some sort of binding precedent that you're setting this. So the next petitioner can come in and say, well, you approved these guys, and so from here forward, that's not what, regardless of how you build this.
Mark was going to say something.
No, Mark, do you have anything? Questions?
If he can hear.
Can you hear us, Mark? Maybe not. It says video feed is frozen.
All right, I'm back on.
We're asking if you had any questions or.
No, I don't have any questions.
I guess my big, it's not really a question, it's just more of a talking point. My big hang up is we've had, I think, roughly 4 multifamily developments in the past year and a half, 2 years that, as Jill said, it all came in at or underneath that 2 unit or 2 space per unit maximum requirement. So it causes me a little heartache if it's kind of, and I understand this is a unique product, a unique development. So I completely understand that. It kind of causes me a little bit of heartache looking at it as a whole, if that makes sense.
I guess I would agree. I'll reiterate what I said last time. I understand the other points, but and I see this is a different product, but it's still multi-family use, correct? I mean, it's
multifamily. So for those that would like to have a rental situation, but don't want to share a wall with
Mhm.
anyone else. That's really what this is.
But that's really the only difference, right? I mean, versus a
I would
three-story.
no. I think what I really want to impress upon is the number of bedrooms that we're talking about here is more than what you see in a traditional apartment. When other applicants have come forward, usually from a design side, they want to be at 2.0 per unit on a multifamily development. Reality is fitting all of that on a site usually yields somewhere in a 1.6 to 1.8. If every developer that I've worked with had their druthers, they'd have 2.0 per unit because they know the pain that happens when you don't have enough parking in a development. So I've worked on several of the multifamilies that are going up right now, the Strategic Capital and trying to think of some others. I'm working on one across the street behind the Get-Go. That's in Zionsville. That did meet 2.0 because it had to, because Zionsville recognized the concern. If you don't have enough, that's really a poor situation that can occur. I think if you really look at the demographics that would move into this type of product and the reality that it is likely that every bedroom would have a car, I would say not every single one of them, but I think it is not unreasonable to say that. Plus the fact that the parking requirements don't consider the fact of any additional allowance for a clubhouse, or if anybody's going to be working in a leasing office, or any visitors that come. It feels to our side is very reasonable to request this above, mainly because of the mix of unit types in this type of development that feels a lot more single family oriented. It's just a matter of not owning, it's renting. But that's kind of the argument I would hope to make before you. Sure.
Just wanted to jump in with some additional comments to complement Brian's as well. I think that the apartment complexes that have come before the Plan Commission have not been in front of this board because they didn't need relief from the zoning ordinance. So I think we can acknowledge the reason why we're in front of you is we're asking for that relief. I think we're asking for that relief because of the unique nature of the site, the unique nature of the fact that it is zoned multifamily. And we are trying to fit this style of project, which will complement the remainder of the Bridal Oaks master plan, if you will. And to do that, we are offering mechanisms to alleviate concerns about the additional parking. One, certainly we want to be concerned about the safety of all of the visitors and the residents there. So this is a gated community. You need a key card to get in there, and so we want to make sure that there are enough spaces per resident and located near their residence. One of the reasons why we're seeking this relief is because we don't have a parking field, a large parking complex, but instead we're offering a unique product to the end user where their parking space is directly in front of, or at least adjacent to their home. I think one item that we're concerned about is the 2 parking spot per unit maximum. I think undershoots the reality and the practicality of most multifamily in this sort of cottage style structure. Brian certainly noted the clubhouse deliveries. I don't think we can be short-sighted in ignoring the fact that users of this community are going to find a parking space if they need one. Visitors will, maintenance men will, Amazon drivers, Uber drivers. And so I think the developer here wants to be cognizant of that and respectful of that, and certainly recognize the safety concerns that come along with that, and offer adequate parking both for the residents as well as the visitors, potential new tenants that park at the clubhouse, as well as those other visitors that I mentioned. And so I think the reason why we're here today is certainly to acknowledge that we've had a collaborative discussion. Now this is the second one in front of this board, Plan Commission, staff, fire safety, police safety, and just feel as though that we've limited the number of spaces that we think practically will serve this community from a very safe perspective for the end user, that is unique as compared to the traditional multifamily that was recently mentioned. Certainly, we also hope that this doesn't cause an aesthetic concern. We think that these are thoughtfully placed parking spaces. They ensure safe travel around the neighborhood, and so hopefully, while this is again a unique request and departure from the ordinance, we've provided reasoning for that. So we appreciate that. Hopefully, that answered one or more of the questions you still had in your mind.
And that did answer one question, because my next question was going to be, I think I saw on the report that we got about entry gates, so it is going to be a gated community.
Yes, I believe there's a gate on the left and the right side of the entrance right before there. There are spaces outside of the gate for visitors as well as potential tenants.
Okay. And then there's also a gate on that, we'll call it like the southwest entrance. Okay.
We've been working with Steve specifically on the exact location.
Okay.
To make sure the distance of turning radiuses are contemplated there.
So when you first came to the town, you weren't contemplating this to be a multifamily project. It was something else.
No, I think from the very beginning, this was, when we got involved in it, it's a detached multifamily development as classified. First thing I did was I called Jill and I said, this is a unique project for me, frankly. It's a kind of a newer project. It's becoming more common, I would say, across. There's one in Fishers right now that we're working on as Kimley Horn. And I asked staff, and maybe it was you too, how do you fit this within the ordinance? And multifamily is a permitted use in the Bridal Oaks PUD, which really this is because it's multifamily. It just, the mix and the type of unit is different, I think, fundamentally than the unit mix that you typically see in a 3 or 4 story apartment complex. Certainly what's right next door to this to the west, they're both multifamily, but they're very different product types. So that was what we found, and pretty quickly we noted, okay, that seems like a low parking ratio for this unit, which is why we came to the BZA last month. The discussion last month was concerns and why are you asking for, and also wanting to know what the Plan Commission would think, which is a little chicken or the egg, because when we went to Plan Commission, they wanted to know what the BZA thought. And after a lengthy discussion, we were approved with the expectation that we'd come back to this board and report. And many of the members are the same on Plan Commission, so it's a unique situation for sure.
And I think ultimately that was a helpful exercise in that I think there was a comment made last meeting, why should we decide on the number of parking spaces over the, as provided by the UDO, that we should decide on if we don't know if the concept plan has been approved? Because obviously if the Plan Commission had made comments that would necessitate a significant decrease in the number of parking spaces, we might not be back here in front of you. So I think that was a thoughtful exercise, and ultimately the Plan Commission did approve that concept plan, and we've tried to limit the type of space, but still feel the reasoning for why we need those extra spaces still exists.
Well, I think this is a unique enough product situation that being concerned about the 4 other previous multifamily properties that came through that met the two per unit standard. I don't think we're going against that with this, since we're really, it's a unique product. So I'm comfortable with it.
I don't think I have any other questions.
I don't have any other questions.
Mark, you still with us?
I am. I don't have any further.
Thanks for your time.
I'd entertain a motion from someone, but
I'll a motion to approve the docket item BZA 22-005-VA, Leo Brown Group Parking Variance, with conditions recommended by staff. I believe there are two of them. Should I read them into the record, or is it as presented in the staff report?
Yes.
And so I noticed there was a little variation, and I think Jill touched on that as far as the number of spaces and things like that. Because I think in here it has 463, and they're asking for 462.
Yes, the final breakdown will be 462 spaces.
Some motion.
I'll second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right. Roll call vote.
Yes.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Motion passes 3-1. Thank you. All right. And where'd my agenda go? I think. Is there any? Oh, yep. So I don't see any other business or announcements or.
The only announcement I'll make is that you notice we have a new board member. Ken recently relocated to White Sound, has previous sport experience, so we're happy to have him.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for volunteering. All right. Hearing nothing else, entertain a motion for number 9.
So moved. Adjourn.
All right. Motion and a second. Do we need roll call for this one?
You can take it by consensus, actually.
Okay. All right. Everybody have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.